The human child's tortured screams rang through the Prilorian warship's halls, as his alien captors tore secrets from his mind and flesh from his bones, unaware humanity would unleash hell to avenge this atrocity. On the bridge of the massive Prilorian warship, Fleet Commander Xanth paced back and forth. His four-clawed hands twitched as he spoke to his subordinate. "They've gone too far this time, Xyloth. Those damned human, they've unleashed a weapon beyond our worst nightmares." Xyloth blinked his reptilian eyes. What happened? Did they attack another outpost? Xanth shook his head. Worse, one of our scouting parties captured a human child on a remote colony world, barely 8 Earth years old. They brought him back here for interrogation. And what did the child reveal? Nothing. We couldn't break him. Not with drugs, not with mind probes, not even when we stripped the flesh from his bones. He never yielded Earth's secrets. We didn't know. We thought their young would be weak like the adults, but this boy, he endured horrors that would break our greatest warriors. And when his father found out... Xanth shuddered. The rage in that human's voice when he broadcast his message to the galaxy still haunted him. Mark Coleman, the boy's father, didn't grovel like the other humans. He said, "You took my son, prepare to witness the true power of humanity." Then he ended the transmission. Xyloth felt a chill run through him, despite the environmental controls. This was unlike any encounter with humans before. What true power was he referring to? Have the long-range sensors picked up anything? Xanth turned to the bridge view screen. A colossal silhouette emerged from the void of space, dwarfing their mighty warship, angular gunmetal grey and bristling with enough firepower to cleave a planet in two. The secret doomsday weapon humanity had been hiding until now. "Helmsman, get us out of here, maximum FTL," Xanth bellowed. But it was too late. The view screen filled with the image of the human juggernaut bearing down on them, poised to unleash its wrath against those who dared to harm one of humanity's children. Xanth shook his head, his voice heavy with despair. "I don't know, Xyloth. This human ship, it's beyond anything we've ever seen. Our scans showed it was powered by a type of energy our scientists can't even begin to understand. It's like nothing in the known universe." Xyloth's eyes widened in disbelief. "But that's impossible. We're the most advanced species in the galaxy. How could the humans have developed something so far beyond our capabilities without us knowing?" Xanth sighed, his shoulders slumping under the weight of the situation. "We underestimated them, Xyloth. We thought their pacifism and diplomacy were signs of weakness. But now, it's clear they were just biding their time, waiting for the right moment to reveal their true strength." Xyloth paced the bridge, his mind racing. "And you said this ship, it took out a dozen of our vessels in an instant, without even firing a visible weapon." Xanth nodded grimly. "It was like nothing I've ever seen. One moment our ships were in formation, ready to engage. The next they were just gone, reduced to atoms in the blink of an eye." Xyloth stopped in his tracks, a look of horror on his face. "By the gods, Xanth, what have we done? We tortured a human child, and now his father has unleashed a weapon capable of wiping out our entire fleet." Xanth's voice was barely a whisper. Coleman's message said the ship was a last resort, a weapon they hoped they'd never have to use. And now, because of what we did to his son, he's unleashed it upon us. The two Prilorians stood in silence, the weight of their actions bearing down on them. They had always believed themselves to be the superior species, but now, faced with the true might of humanity, they realized just how wrong they had been. Xyloth finally broke the silence, his voice trembling. "What do we do now, Xanth? How do we face a power like this?" Xanth leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "That's the worst part, Xyloth. The human warship, it didn't just attack our fleet, it broadcast a message to every Prilorian ship in the sector." Xyloth's eyes widened in disbelief. "What did it say?" Xanth took a deep breath, his voice heavy with the weight of the message. It was Coleman. He said, "You have seen but a fraction of what we are capable of. Your cruelty towards our child has awakened a fury in humanity that will not be quenched until justice is served. We offer you one chance at mercy. Return my son to me alive and unharmed, and we will spare your lives. Fail to do so, and we will unleash the full might of our anger upon your entire species." Xyloth gasped, his hands gripping the edge of the console. "They're offering us a chance to surrender, after what we did to their child." Xanth nodded solemnly, his eyes meeting Xyloth's. It seems that even in their rage the humans still cling to a sense of mercy, but make no mistake, Xyloth, this is not a weakness, it's a strength. They are giving us a choice, a chance to avoid total annihilation. Xyloth was silent for a moment, his mind reeling as he contemplated the gravity of the situation. The humans had every right to seek revenge, to unleash their full fury upon the Prilorians for the atrocities committed against their child. And yet, they were offering a path to redemption, a chance for the Prilorians to make amends and avoid destruction. "What are you going to do, Xanth?" Xyloth finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Xanth stood up, his posture resolute, his eyes filled with a determination that Xyloth had never seen before. "I'm going to do what I should have done from the beginning. I'm going to return the child to his father and beg for the forgiveness of humanity. It's the only way to save our people from the consequences of my foolish pride." Xyloth nodded, a newfound respect for his commander growing within him. It took a strong leader to admit their mistakes and take action to rectify them, even in the face of such overwhelming odds. "I'll prepare a shuttle immediately," Xyloth said, his fingers already dancing across the console. "We'll need to move quickly if we're going to have any chance of making this right." Xanth placed a hand on Xyloth's shoulder, his grip firm but reassuring. "Thank you, my friend. I know this won't be easy, but it's the only path forward. We must show the humans that we are willing to take responsibility for our actions and do whatever it takes to earn their forgiveness." Xanth's hands trembled as he absorbed the gravity of Xyloth's revelation. The human child they had captured and tortured was no ordinary boy, but the son of a formidable Earth warrior. And now, that warrior was coming for them with a weapon beyond their comprehension. Xyloth's voice was barely a whisper as he continued. "There's more, Xanth. When we finally managed to restrain the boy again, he looked directly at the commander, his eyes blazing with a fury that belied his young age. He said, 'You have no idea what you've unleashed. My father will stop at nothing to get me back, and when he does, he'll make you regret ever setting foot on our world.'" Xanth felt a cold sweat break out on his brow. "What have we done, Xyloth? We've awakened a sleeping giant, and now we're about to face the consequences of our actions." Xyloth nodded grimly. "I've never seen anything like it, Xanth. The way that boy fought, the determination in his eyes, it was like he was born for battle. And if he's just a child, imagine what his father must be capable of." Xanth's mind raced as he tried to process the implications of their actions. They had always believed themselves to be the superior species, but now, faced with the true might of humanity, they realized just how wrong they had been. "We have to make this right, Xyloth," Xanth said, his voice filled with a newfound resolve. "We have to return the boy to his father and beg for their forgiveness. It's the only way to save our people from the hell we've brought upon ourselves." Xyloth nodded, his expression grim. "I'll prepare the boy for transport immediately. But Xanth, what if it's not enough? What if the humans don't accept our surrender?" Xanth met Xyloth's gaze, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "Then we'll face the consequences of our actions with whatever honor we have left. But we have to try, Xyloth. We have to show them that even we, in our arrogance, are capable of recognizing our mistakes and seeking redemption." As Xyloth turned to leave, Xanth called out to him, "And Xyloth, make sure the boy is treated with the utmost care and respect from this moment forward. We've done enough damage already." Xyloth nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of Xanth's words. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were about to pay the price for their hubris. But perhaps with this one act of contrition, they could begin to make amends and salvage what little hope remained for their species. As Xyloth left to prepare the boy for his return, Xanth sat back in his chair, his mind reeling with the enormity of the task before them. They had awoken the fury of a father whose love for his son knew no bounds, and now they would have to face the consequences of their actions head-on. Xanth and Xyloth sprinted down the winding corridors of the Prilorian warship, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. As they approached the detention block, the unmistakable sounds of a struggle reached their ears. Xanth shot Xyloth a worried glance as they quickened their pace. Bursting through the door, they were greeted by a sight that stopped them in their tracks. The human child stood at the center of the cell, his small frame heaving with exertion. At his feet lay the unconscious bodies of his Prilorian guards, their weapons scattered across the floor. The boy's face was a mask of fierce determination, his eyes blazing with a fire that belied his young age. Xanth slowly raised his hands, palms outward in a gesture of peace. "We're not here to hurt you," he said, his voice low and steady. "We're here to take you back to your father." The boy's gaze darted between Xanth and Xyloth, his body tensing as if preparing for another fight. "Why should I believe you?" he spat, his voice laced with venom. "You've done nothing but lie and hurt me since you brought me here." Xanth nodded, his expression heavy with regret. "You're right. We have wronged you and your people greatly, but we wish to make amends. Your father has shown us the error of our ways." At the mention of his father, the boy's eyes widened, a flicker of hope breaking through the anger. "My dad? You talked to him?" Xyloth stepped forward, his voice earnest. "He sent a message to our entire fleet. He's coming for you with a warship unlike anything we've ever seen. He's giving us a chance to return you peacefully, to avoid further bloodshed." The boy's face hardened once more, his small hands clenching into fists. "My dad's not afraid of you. He's going to make you pay for what you did to me." Xanth knelt down, bringing himself to the child's level. He looked into the boy's eyes, his own gaze filled with a mix of sorrow and resolve. "I know, and we are ready to face the consequences of our actions. But first, we need to get you home. Will you come with us?" For a long moment the boy remained silent, his eyes searching Xanth's face for any sign of deceit. Finally he gave a curt nod. "Okay, but if you try anything funny, my dad will blast you into stardust." As they led the boy out of the detention block, stepping carefully over the fallen guards, Xyloth leaned in close to Xanth. "Even their children possess a warrior's spirit," he whispered, his voice filled with a newfound respect. "We never stood a chance against these humans, did we?" Xanth shook his head, a grim smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "No, Xyloth, I fear we have awoken a sleeping giant, and now we must face the full might of its wrath." The trio made their way through the ship's labyrinthine corridors, the boy's presence drawing curious stares from the Prilorian crew. Some looked upon the child with fear, others with a begrudging respect. It was clear that word of the boy's actions in the detention block had spread quickly. As they approached the hangar bay, the ship suddenly shuddered, the deck plates beneath their feet vibrating with a deep, ominous hum. Xanth and Xyloth exchanged a knowing glance. The human warship had arrived. The piercing wail of the alarm reverberated through the corridors as Xanth and Xyloth ushered the human child towards the hangar bay. Xyloth's fingers flew across the console, his eyes widening in disbelief as he processed the information before him. "Xanth, the human warship, it's here. It just appeared out of nowhere, right on top of us." Xyloth's voice trembled, his usually stoic demeanor cracking under the weight of the revelation. Xanth's head snapped towards Xyloth, his own eyes mirroring the shock that gripped his subordinate. "That's impossible. Our sensors should have detected it long before it got this close." The boy, his ears attuned to their conversation, allowed a smirk to tug at the corners of his mouth. "My dad's ship, the Retribution. It has a cloaking device that makes it invisible to your sensors. He could have been following you for days and you'd never know." Xanth and Xyloth exchanged a glance, the gravity of their situation settling upon them like a suffocating weight. The fear in their eyes was palpable, the realization that they were now at the mercy of a power they had so gravely underestimated. Suddenly the ship shuddered violently, the force of the impact sending Xyloth staggering towards the console. His fingers gripped the edges, his knuckles turning white as he fought to maintain his balance. "Xanth, the human ship, It just took out our engines with a single shot. We're dead in space." Xyloth's voice was barely a whisper, the horror of their predicament stealing the breath from his lungs. Xanth braced himself against the console, his mind reeling as he tried to comprehend the magnitude of the human ship's capabilities. How is that possible? Our shields were at full strength. The boy's laughter cut through the tension, a sound that sent chills down the spines of the two Prilorians. The Retribution's weapons are designed to slice through your shields like they're not even there. My dad helped design them himself. Another blast rocked the ship, the lights flickering ominously as the power systems struggled to compensate for the damage. Xanth drew in a deep breath, the weight of command settling heavily upon his shoulders. "Xyloth, hail the human ship. We need to let them know we're surrendering." Xyloth nodded, his fingers already dancing across the console as he opened a channel. "Earth Vessel Retribution, this is Commander Xanth of the Prilorian Fleet. We are standing down and preparing to return your child. Please hold your fire." The silence that followed was deafening, the seconds stretching into an eternity as they awaited a response. Then the comm crackled to life, a voice that sent a shiver down Xanth's spine. "This is Captain Mark Coleman of the Earthship Retribution. If any harm has come to my son, there will be no mercy. Prepare to be boarded." Xanth slumped back in his seat, the realization of his defeat washing over him like a tidal wave. Xyloth placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity in the face of their shared fate. "We did the right thing, Xanth. Surrendering was the only way to save our people." Xanth nodded, but the haunted look in his eyes spoke volumes. "I only hope that the humans can find it in their hearts to forgive us for what we've done." Xanth's eyes locked onto the imposing figure of Captain Coleman, his words heavy with the weight of his sins. "I understand, Captain. We will accept whatever consequences you deem necessary for our actions." Coleman's gaze bore into Xanth, his voice low and measured. "The only reason you and your crew are still alive is because my son is unharmed. But make no mistake, the atrocities you've committed against him and our people will not go unpunished." Xyloth stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he spoke. "Captain Coleman, if I may, your son's bravery and resilience in the face of our cruelty was truly remarkable. He never once yielded, never once betrayed your people, even when we—" He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Coleman's eyes flashed with a mix of pride and anger. "My son is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. It's not just him, Commander Xanth. Every human child possesses that same fire, that same unbreakable will. It's what defines us as a species." Xanth nodded solemnly, the realization of his own arrogance weighing heavily upon him. "We see that now, Captain. We thought we could break him, that we could use him to gain an advantage over your people. But we were wrong. So very wrong." Coleman's gaze hardened as he turned back to Xanth. "You've made a grave mistake, Commander. You've underestimated humanity, and in doing so, you've unleashed a fury that will not be quelled until justice is served." Xanth bowed his head, the gravity of his actions sinking in like a lead weight. "We are prepared to face the consequences of our actions, Captain. We only ask that you show mercy to those who were not directly involved in your son's mistreatment." Coleman's eyes narrowed, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "Mercy? You dare ask for mercy after what you've done? After the suffering you've inflicted upon an innocent child?" Xyloth's voice wavered as he spoke up once more. "Captain, please, we were blinded by our own arrogance, our own belief in our superiority. But your son, he opened our eyes. He showed us the true strength of your people, the depth of your resolve." Coleman looked down at his son, still clutched tightly in his arms. The boy's face was buried in his father's chest, his small frame shaking with a mix of relief and exhaustion. Coleman's expression softened for a moment, a flicker of tenderness passing across his battle-hardened features. "You're right, Commander Xyloth. My son is a shining example of what it means to be human, and it's because of him, because of his unbreakable spirit, that I will show you mercy. Not for your sake, but for his." Xanth's eyes widened in surprise, a glimmer of hope sparking in his chest. "Thank you, Captain. We are forever in your debt." Coleman's gaze hardened once more as he turned back to Xanth. "Don't mistake this for forgiveness, Commander. Your people will still answer for your crimes, but perhaps through this act of mercy we can begin to build a bridge between our species. A bridge built on respect rather than fear and cruelty, and—" Xanth nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "We will do whatever it takes to earn that respect, Captain, you have my word." With those final words echoing in their ears, Xanth and Xyloth allowed themselves to be led away, their hearts heavy with the weight of their actions, but their minds filled with a newfound respect for the indomitable spirit of humanity. As the human boarding party prepared to depart the Prylorian ship with Xanth and Xyloth in custody, Xyloth hesitantly approached Captain Coleman. The human leader turned to face the alien, his expression guarded. "Captain, if I may, there's something I think you should know," Xyloth said, his voice trembling slightly. Coleman's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, allowing Xyloth to continue. Xyloth glanced at Xanth, who nodded for him to go on. "When we first captured your son, we underestimated him. We thought he would be easy to break, like the other species we've conquered in the past." Xyloth's gaze dropped to the floor, shame etched into his features. "But your son, he surprised us. No matter what we did, no matter how much pain we inflicted, he never gave in. He never stopped fighting." Captain Coleman's fists clenched at his sides, his knuckles turning white. Yet he held his tongue, allowing Xyloth to finish. A single tear rolled down Captain Coleman's cheek, a mix of pride and sorrow shining in his eyes. "That's my boy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Xanth stepped forward, his head bowed. "Your son's strength, it made us realize the folly of our ways. If a mere child could possess such courage, such unbreakable will, then what hope did we have against your entire species?" Coleman nodded, understanding dawning on his face. "That's the thing about humanity, Commander. Our greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons, it's our spirit. It's the fire that burns within each and every one of us, the refusal to ever give up, no matter the odds." He looked down at his son, who grinned up at him, the boy's eyes shining with the same fierce determination that had carried him through his ordeal. "And it's a fire that burns brightest in our children, the future of our race," Coleman added, his hand resting on his son's shoulder. Xyloth bowed his head, his voice filled with reverence. "We see that now, Captain. Your son taught us a valuable lesson, one we will never forget. The human spirit is a force to be reckoned with." As the humans departed with their prisoners, Xanth and Xyloth were left to ponder the future of their species, and the role they would play in a galaxy forever changed by the might of humanity. The once proud Prylorian commanders now understood the true depths of their arrogance and the terrible price they had paid for underestimating the strength of the human race. As the Retribution sped away from the crippled Prylorian ship, Captain Coleman sat in the medbay, holding his son's hand, while the ship's doctor tended to the boy's injuries. The gentle hum of the medical equipment filled the room, a stark contrast to the chaos and violence that had unfolded just moments ago. As Xanth and Xyloth, their hands bound and their heads bowed, were escorted into the medbay by a pair of armed human guards, they stood before Coleman, their once proud stances now replaced by a posture of defeat and shame. Coleman looked up at the aliens, his eyes blazing with a fury that was barely contained. "You'll pay for what you've done to my son and to countless others," he said, his voice low and steady. "But before you face justice, I want you to understand the true extent of your mistake." Xanth, his gaze fixed on the floor, spoke softly. "We already know, Captain. We underestimated your species and we paid the price." Coleman shook his head, a mirthless chuckle escaping his lips. "No, you still don't get it. It's not just about what you did to my son. It's about what you've unleashed upon the galaxy." Xyloth's head snapped up, confusion etched across his alien features. "What do you mean?" Coleman leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his eyes locked onto the aliens. "The Retribution, this ship that so easily defeated your fleet, it's just the beginning. When your people dared to harm one of our children, You didn't just anger a single father. You awakened the fury of an entire species. Xanth's eyes widened, realization dawning on his face. The other human ships, they're coming, aren't they? Coleman nodded, his expression grim. As we speak, a fleet of vessels just like the Retribution is mobilizing. They're coming to finish what we started, to ensure that no species ever dares to threaten our children again. Coleman stood, his tall frame towering over the cowering aliens. You've sealed your own fate. The human race will not rest until every last one of your kind answers for your crimes. You wanted to see the might of humanity? Well, now you'll witness it firsthand. As the guards led Xanth and Xyloth away, their faces pale with the realization of the storm they had brought upon their people, Coleman turned back to his son. The boy, his injuries now bandaged and treated, looked up at his father with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. Coleman sat on the edge of the bed, his hand gently brushing a stray lock of hair from his son's forehead. It's over now, son. You're safe. And I promise, as long as there's a single human left standing, no one will ever harm you again. The boy nodded, a fierce determination burning in his young eyes despite the ordeal he had endured. I know, Dad, because we're human, and humans don't break. Xanth and Xyloth huddled together in the ruins of their once great capital city, the acrid smell of smoke and ash hanging heavy in the air. The devastation was total, the once towering skyscrapers reduced to piles of twisted metal and shattered glass. The streets, once bustling with life, were now eerily silent, save for the occasional crunch of rubble underfoot. Xanth let out a bitter laugh, the sound echoing off the broken walls. We thought we could break them, Xyloth. We thought we could crush their spirit by targeting their young. How foolish we were. Xyloth nodded solemnly, his eyes haunted by the memories of the human onslaught. We unleashed a monster, Xanth. A monster of our own making. The humans. They didn't just defeat us. They annihilated us. Xanth sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat as he surveyed the destruction around them. And the worst part, we deserve it. Every last bit of it. We brought this upon ourselves. Xyloth was silent for a moment, his mind drifting back to their encounter with the human child. Do you remember what the human boy said, back on our ship? That humans don't break. Xanth nodded, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. I remember, and he was right. We tried to break them, but in the end they broke us. Xyloth looked out over the devastated landscape, a strange mix of admiration and fear in his eyes. The humans, they're not like any species we've encountered before. Their strength, their resilience. It's terrifying. Xanth laughed humorlessly, shaking his head. And to think we once considered them weak. We thought their love for their children made them vulnerable, but it was that very love that made them unstoppable. Xyloth nodded, his expression grim. We've learned our lesson, Xanth, but at what cost? Our people, our civilization, it's all gone. And for what? A moment of arrogance, a misguided attempt at conquest. Xanth was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant as he pondered their fate. Finally he spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of their actions. We'll rebuild, Xyloth. It will take time, and it will be hard, but we'll rebuild. And this time, we'll do it with the knowledge of our own failings and the respect for the power of the human spirit. As the two aliens sat amidst the ruins of their world, the weight of their actions hanging heavy upon them, they knew that the galaxy would never be the same. For they had witnessed firsthand the might of humanity and the terrible price of underestimating the strength of a parent's love for their child. Xyloth turned to Xanth, his voice barely above a whisper. What do you think will happen now? Will the humans leave us to pick up the pieces, or will they finish what they started? Xanth shook his head, his expression thoughtful. I don't know, Xyloth, but I do know one thing. We can never underestimate them again. We can never forget the lesson they've taught us. Xyloth nodded, his eyes hardening with resolve. You're right, Xanth. From this day forward we must live with the knowledge of our own failings and the respect for the power of the human spirit. Xanth stood, his gaze sweeping over the ruins of their once proud civilization. "Come, Xyloth, we have work to do. Our people need us now more than ever." As the two aliens picked their way through the rubble, their hearts heavy with the weight of their actions, they knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. But they also knew that they had no choice but to face the consequences of their arrogance, and to rebuild their world with a newfound respect for the strength and resilience of the human race. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.